Tara Galeano did an MA in contemplative psychotherapy in 2000 and helps women reimagine their bodies after cancer and rekindle their sexuality. She's creating an online course and writing a book based on the class Rediscovering My Body, so she may share widely with those that are seeking sexual renewal. The name of this piece is Experiencing Pleasure After Pain, What I Learned from Women Who Have Had Cancer. Please give your hands up for Tara Galeano.
Hi, my name is Tara Galeano, and I'm a certified sex therapist, and Boulder Sex Therapy is my business. So I don't know how many of you have met a certified sex therapist before, and maybe have some questions. So my hope is over the course of my talk, I can answer some of your questions. So the first answer is, most of the folks that I work with are in long-standing committed relationships that have fallen into disrepair, not because of a lack of love or camaraderie, but because they live together as roommates, best friends, and just not lovers. So best friends, that's how most of my clients would describe their relationship. Good in most areas, except for the sexual arena. Things are good enough in a humdrum, I'm settling kind of way. And they're looking for something more. But they see that sex is an indulgence, kind of a luxury. It's the frosting on a cake, a cherry on a sundae, sprinkles on an ice cream cone. I mean, you get what I mean. It's just not essential. And they can maintain things and trade in for good enough and settling until they're ready for something different. And then they come seek me out. They're ready to rock the boat. They're ready to try new things. And that's where I step in. And so what I find is that those people, they've got a settling state of mind. They think that things are good enough, and they've shut off sexy. And sexy is really a state of mind. And so through experiential activities, I help people try on different behaviors and do things that they wouldn't normally think of doing. And I help them regain sexy. I help them regain some confidence. I help them start seeing sex as not an indulgence, but a necessity. And sex therapy not as indulgence either. So I want to give you an extreme example of some of the people that I work with. And there's some women that I really admire who have gone through some really life-changing experiences. And they're looking to reimagine their bodies and rediscover sexuality. And these women are done settling, and they're ready for something different. And these women that I speak of have all had cancer. And the cancer that they've had varies. And what I find is that oftentimes they're dealing with the cultural shame and the resistance of coming to a sex therapist. They find that when they're in treatment, 70% of doctors are actually not talking about sex, with their cancer patients. And so how many of you, and it's hard to see with these lights, but how many of you, and you don't need to raise your hand, and we'll practice first, how many of you find sex renewing? But before you answer that, oh, okay, good, somebody raised their hand, that's good. To keep it confidential, I'm just gonna ask you to wink. So we'll do a practice run. So how many people like bagels? All right, okay. And how many people like pizza? All right, so I'm gonna ask you, how many people think sex is renewing? Okay, how many people think that sex is revitalizing? All right, how many think sex is reconnecting with their partner? Okay, all right, great, you guys did a great job. And so, seems to me that as health providers, we should be harnessing that energy and really utilizing it for healing. And I think that's an important topic that so many health providers are missing when they're working with people that have had cancer. So the women who are coming to see me see that this is really a potential pathway for healing. And they're scared, and they're a little bit uncertain. And the body that they have lived in for quite some time has recently caused them a lot of pain. They've felt damaged, they've felt scarred, and it's hard to step into that body, especially because they've often felt betrayed. They've done all the right things, they ate all the right foods, and yet they still had cancer. And so to step into that body and really be in it, to experience pleasure, takes a tremendous amount of courage. And so it's my job to help those women. And about 4 years ago, Nana Bo Christensen, who's a nurse navigator at Boulder Community Health, contacted me, and she said, these women want to talk about sex, and I really need a professional here. Can you help guide and facilitate the conversation and answer some questions? And I said, yeah. And that was really my call to action. I thought, oh my goodness, I totally want to talk to these women. And did you know that 40% of US adults are going to experience cancer in their lifetime? That's a lot of us. That's a horrifying number. And it's one that really strikes me to the core, and I'm so happy that Nana Bo sought me out and I got this call to action. And my big dilemma was that I had not worked with people who had long-standing debilitating illnesses, and I was a little bit concerned just because I hadn't had that experience. But when I was able to review my work and really look at the people that had come to see me as a sex therapist, so many of them needed to reimagine their bodies and reconnect to their sexuality. And the first piece was really coming into their bodies, because the more that they were able to be in their body, the more that they can experience pleasure, and the more that they can then share that pleasure with another person. So I knew that I had some nuggets that I could transfer to help these women. And so the first piece that I looked at was a body map. So I invited the women to pick a partner and draw the outline of each other. And it was a very beautiful experience and intimate experience, because the women oftentimes hadn't been touched in parts of those bodies before. So if you have to draw the outline of another person, it's a pretty intimate experience, and to allow someone to do that for you. And when the women saw the images that were created and how they were whole and intact, it was a very joyous experience for them. And it cracks me up because oftentimes the first thing they said was, I didn't know I was so skinny. And I would reframe that and say, yes, and you're whole and complete. And there is this image of you that you can gaze at and really try to identify with. And I think it was so important to have that image external, because it made it so much safer for them. And so when they could see themselves, they could really say, I am whole, and someone else witnessed me as whole as they drew me. And so my instructions were simple. So then I would invite the women to fill in those outlines of their images, outlines of their bodies. And so red was, do not touch me there. And green was, I'm good to go, you can touch me there. And very simple instructions. And yet I would see these decoupage masterpieces, and there were flowers and trees and birds and such vibrancy. It was so amazing to behold that this artist in all of these women had been dormant for so long, was unleashed, and they were able to create these beautiful images and share it. And when they brought it to the group and they were able to share it, they were witnessed, they were supported, and they were really held. And I think for the first time, so many of those women felt like they were seen in their new bodies that may have been altered because of surgery. And it was so fulfilling for them. And because they received such good positive feedback from the group, a lot of them took the next step, which was to share it with their partner, which was really hard for a lot of them. But they found that once they did show their partner their image and their decoupage masterpiece, that there was a lot of intimacy created. And there was a lot of vulnerability that they had shared. And the quality of their relationship began to get just a little bit better. They could really feel like their intimacy was increasing. And so through the body mapping, I really wanted to get the women to be able to be in their bodies. And so I think this external image was great because it was safe, or a little bit safer than their own experience in their body. But I wanted them to really step into being in their body. And being trained as a contemplative psychotherapist, I knew that the breath is the best connection between the mind and the body. And I invited them to do some breath work. And I invited them to notice where there is constriction in the body when the breath flowed in. And I invited them to let that go, if they could. And then I also asked them to recognize where the tension is, even if they had to look at the body map to identify the parts of their body. Because sometimes they didn't have any feeling in their body. Sometimes it's the numb sensation that they often feel first, and a lot of them didn't even have that. So there was just no feeling. And so coming into the body was really scary. And yet these women were able to take the breath and notice the breath and able to really start to feel themselves gently and to be able to be in their bodies, if even only for a little bit. And so we always began the group with a mindfulness, breath awareness exercise. So after the body mapping, after the breath awareness, I thought that it was really important that we do something as a group that would step us out into the world. And I always kind of imagine us holding hands and stepping out into the world. And our first step out into the world was to an adult toy store. And I thought, oh, that's so much fun. I'm a sex therapist. This is what we should be doing. And it was great because so many of the women had never had that experience of going to a adult toy store before. And if they had, they didn't feel comfortable. But because of the camaraderie that was built up in the group over the past 4 weeks, they knew that they had each other's backs, and they knew that it would be fun. And so that experience for us together as a group was one of pleasure, and then the pleasure was through laughter. And we held dildos, and we felt vibrators, and we tried lube, and we laughed, and it was so great to hear that connection, and women bought lots of things. That was fun. And so I wanted to share with you the possibilities of what can be when, and I heard this theme again and again today of not embracing part of ourselves in the cosplay, the shadow, even the lying. It's we really need to make room and spaciousness for those pieces of ourselves. And I would say that that goes for anyone with cancer, but all of us who are living with people who have had cancer. So how do we make that spaciousness in our lives for them? And I think that part of the reason why this class was so successful is because the women showed up as their authentic selves, that they were willing to go through the body mapping and the breath awareness, and to go to the toy store, even though it pushed them out of their comfort zone. And I know that a small group of women can create a lot of intimacy and community, and that was a critical piece to the healing as well. And so whatever expertise I may have shared with the group was a piece, but what the women each brought was so powerful and normalizing that they all had a story to share about how cancer had impacted their lives. And I know that through this work that the body is all we have, and that we really need to embrace being in our bodies, and that it's only through the love of our bodies that we can love other people, and that sexy is a state of mind, and that we can bring sexy back.